You are listening to the CAD podcast. This is the place where computer-aided design and drafting meets humor and practicality, with a touch of business acumen thrown in for fun. Jim and Rocco, the owners of Zentech Consultants, the premier U.S. technology consulting firm for architecture, engineering, construction, and manufacturing, discuss the fascinating world of CAD with some humor and some honesty. The CAD podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the CAD podcast with Jim and Rocco from Zentech Consultants. I am Jim Coppinger, the good-looking one, and with me is...
Who said you're good-looking? This is
well, I do. Nobody else is going to say it.
I think we should have a vote. If you're a podcast listener, I think you should email us and just tell us who sounds better looking.
Listen, you know I have a face made for podcasting, dude. Oh, goodness. All right, so Rocco's here with me as always. And with us today, we have another of our favorite guests back once again. We have Robert Green with us today. Robert's the Director of Implementation at Bricsys. Boy, I'm having a hard time speaking this morning. He's also a noted speaker, consultant, writer, and just a general all-around expert on everything CAD. He's run Robert Green Consulting for many, many years and is the author of Cadalyst, CAD Manager's newsletter. He's also got his book out there, Expert CAD Management, The Complete Guide. So, Robert, thank you so much for coming back.
You are welcome. Thanks for the nice invite, and I'm not getting in the middle of your two arguments.
Yeah, I'm thinking, Robert's thinking, well, I'm better looking than both of you combined.
Yep. Hey, poor Robert's going, yeah, I've seen them both, and they are both ugly, dude. So, I got you. That's what our wives say. It's all good. So, all right. So, today, what are we Robert, you had a great idea for today's session. So, we're talking about balancing your software portfolio, which is a very cool term that Robert came up with. But what that means and how it works and why it's important to anybody working in the design and construction world is what we're going to be talking about today. So with that, Robert, let's start with this concept that you put ahead of this idea of a software portfolio. What exactly does it mean and why is it important for people to understand it and be able to balance it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something that I really just kind of started to think about a couple of years ago in more detail. I mean, it's kind of like if you have an investment portfolio, you probably got some stocks, you've probably got some CDs, you've got some different assets, and the idea is that you're going to use those different assets and tools to achieve a financial objective. And it's not unlike the software that we have in a company ecosystem. We've got BIM tools and CAD tools and cloud tools and utilities and plotting, and all this stuff kind of adds up to be able to get designs and documentation pushed out. So all of that I kind of call the software portfolio. Why it's important, to understand that really is that it's an ecosystem, right? It's not that the entire company is done around one piece of software or another piece of software, although given departments might think that.
Yeah,
but on the company as a whole, you're trying to get a result out of all this software, and it's important that all the pieces work together to get you to your goal.
Okay. No, that's a very good point. So looking at that kind of from a basic standpoint, right? I mean, I can see that, knowing the software that you have in-house, that's always good data. But I think there's more to it than just an inventory when we're talking about this concept, right? There's the added benefit of, being able to identify and to eliminate, duplication of effort and tools within your workflow, right? Once you got a good idea what tools that you actually have in place, right? And Rocco and I have actually talked about this a lot on this podcast, right? I'm a firm believer that more software is almost always the wrong answer to your business needs. I think it's about having only the software that you absolutely need that's going to do the tasks that you need to meet your business goals and nothing more. So, Robert, how do people then, if you're looking with that idea in mind, right? How do they begin to balance this software portfolio, right? Is it most important to look at the software features, right, and decide what you do, or do you choose your software based on the workflow that you need?
I agree with your latter statement, but I start in a more simple place, which is just looking around the organization. Ask yourself, who each on a desktop by desktop basis, who is using which tools. So if you had to guess, Larry over here, is doing a lot of architectural design, so he's probably using BIM more often than other people. I go through it like at that level.
It's basic but vital. Yeah, no, that's an excellent point.
And it's what I often find, which is really interesting, is that a company will tell me, well, we've got 74 seats of Civil 3D, and I say, okay, well, show me these 74 people who are using it, and they show me about 18 people who are using it. Disconnect there, right? So I think that just going through at a very top level, who does what type of job function and what tool do they probably need to use, that's the first level of analysis that I want to do on my software portfolio. So I always start there. It's simple. I don't get down in the weeds too quick. I kind of stay up at a high level.
Sure. So Rocco, let's bring you in here. So is that kind of the approach that you take when you're working with Zentek clients? I mean, are we focusing on selling the software package in general for as many seats as we can get? Because let's face it, we do software resales as well. Or do you kind of tie in and try to work with what Robert's saying, which is understanding who's doing what, who needs what are the pain points of the client, and try to fit the sale and the support package, whatever it may be, to that specific need.
Oh, it's definitely the latter option that you just presented. I mean, there's definitely overuse of software out there. I mean, we definitely see that all the time, and it translates obviously into a lot of extra money that's being put out there, particularly now if you're working with a software vendor that's charging you on a user basis for the tools that you're working with. I mean, so it's hugely important to look at each individual and what they truly need. What are they truly having issues with? What do they need to keep their workflow going and not going overkill in terms of the power that they need to perform their everyday tasks.
And that's a good point too, right? It's like you said, not having too many seats of the software, but also making sure that the software they have is the correct one that does what that person needs it to do for their job, right? And there's not always all sizes fits one answer, right? Okay, so then my thought there, Robert, right, is that the finding the pain points and building your portfolio to address them, right, and making sure people have the right software. That it sounds easy enough, and it really is. It's an easy thing to do, but my father always told me, right, an easy task isn't always a simple task. They're not the same thing, right? He used to say, it's easy to rob a bank, right? Just go in and take money out of the building. That's easy. It's not simple though, right? Because you got to worry about guards and the FBI and prison and those minor inconveniences. And I think that this idea of software portfolio adjustment is easy but not always simple. I think there are a lot of steps and things that you need to consider when you're looking at rebalancing this. So where do you think users begin this process, right? How do they determine exactly who needs what and how it needs to be updated, or what processes need to be adapted, what can be eliminated? Where do we begin that?
Right. I mean, where I start is that basic primary sort that I described a few minutes ago, right? Is this person an architect? If so, they're probably a BIM person, like that. And that will give you a first glimpse into whether you've purchased more tools than you need in one area or perhaps not another. You just haven't matched, in general terms, the tools to the functionalities that people need to have. Now, my second sort on that is to actually start talking to, I call them power users. These are your CAD managers, your deputy CAD managers, these people. And what I find quite a lot is that a lot of people in the organization are being provided with a heavy duty tool. They're being given a sledgehammer. In reality, they just need to drive in thumbtacks. You're probably spending way too much on that person. But then again, you can go into another department and you can see that these people have been suffering with a really undercapitalized tool. In essence, they need a sledgehammer, but they've been given thumbtacks. So in a financial portfolio, you would call that rebalancing, right? Maybe getting out of some stocks or getting out of one class of stocks into another. So in a CAD software rebalancing, I'm going to the people around my organization who have the best idea of what's being used, what needs to be used, what's not going optimally. And then that gives me my first real good glimpse of how do I need to rebalance these tools? Which ones are not necessary? Where do I need to invest? Where can I drop licenses? That's where I'm trying to get to next. It's not a super detailed analysis at this point, but it's pretty good. And the licensing picture of what I need to do for my budget next year starts to become more clear after this step.
Yeah, and I think, the other thing that people need to keep in mind with that is, on the back end, what you're doing, like you said at the end, is you're actually freeing up revenue. One of the things we run up against all the time is everybody we talk to is in the same boat, which is that, hey, I want to do this, I want to do training, I want to do support, I want to send my guys to this class or that, whatever it is, we need to get a new tool or we need to get an upgraded plotter, but we just can't afford it. And it's exactly what you said. We see all the time that people are, like you said, we got 72 seats of Civil 3D for 18 users. Take that money, right? Cut out the seats you don't need and turn that to other tools, things that are going to directly benefit your end users. So that's a great place to start, I think. So I also think, any way you cut it, I think there's a lot of info that you do need to start making these decisions. And like I said, it's not hard to find it, right? It's about sitting down and talking to people. And I think, that a common mistake that people run into when they're taking on a task like this is they try to do it all by themselves, right? They look at the issues that they've noted. They set about resolving them with the info that they have available. And I think that that's limiting. I think that, no single person, except Robert, of course. Robert is good enough to do this. No one else is, though. A single person isn't really good enough to determine where all of your issues lie and what the right answers are for every group within your company by yourself. I think you need to work with a lot of different people. You got to talk to people, get their perspectives, right? You're going to develop kind of a wealth of data that's going to point you to what's the best answer for each of those groups. It's going to be different for each one of them. And I think that trying to find the answer from your perspective, whether you're the owner, the executive director, the CAD manager, right, the department head, I think that's limiting, and I think it's a mistake. So Robert, how do you recommend people go about collecting the data, right? Who do they talk to, and how do they have these conversations, without stepping on toes or causing misunderstandings or becoming a perceived threat to the status quo?
Yes, the psychology management. It's not a technology job, it's a psychology job. So I always, I've got a saying that I truly love, which is you don't know what you don't know. And as the CAD manager who's probably spearheading this, I don't know what I don't know. That's why I go to my power users. Now, my power users don't know what they don't know, which is most often financial, because they want to have a tool in front of them that makes their life as easy as possible, and they don't care what it costs. So then I have to go talk to somebody like the CFO or the engineering manager, but they don't know what they don't know. And that's probably, hey, we've got too much of this over here, not enough of this over here. We need to rebalance. So I actually find that it's kind of a circular conversation where you just iterate. It's kind of like a punch list when you're building a house. Eventually the punch list gets down to about nothing, and that's probably when you've got it about right. Now, if you bring in somebody external, who understands the software and the cost and the networks and the technology piece of it, that's another perfectly valid source of information that you'll want to use. Now, one thing before I leave this, you said without causing friction or sideways looks or something like that. Now, the way that I have always approached this is when I talk to people about any given issue, problem, whatever, I always say, I am interested in getting this done as efficiently as possible. And for the company, that's financial. And for you, that's the least amount of time you spend in front of this machine getting your job done. So then everybody is in a positive state, except for somebody who may just want to be argumentative. They just don't want to change. They're just not interested. And now, by doing what I've done in the way I've done it, anyone who really wants to argue with me now is They don't want to learn a better way to do things, and they don't want to save the company money. And I'm willing to have that argument all day long. And management is going to back me over that person every time.
Right. You show everybody who's involved that it's going to be to their personal benefit. And then, like you said, the people who are left are just those outliers. And there's always that person. People
are always there.
I come in the morning, I get my coffee, I press A, I press B. That's what I do. It's okay. Yeah, that's not helping anybody. But yeah, there's always that person. So luckily, they're usually the minority when you run across them. So. All right, so I think we can take a break here, catch a word from today's sponsors. And when we come back, we're going to get into some of the technical side of your portfolio structure while we're talking with Robert Green. So we will be back in just a few minutes, folks, with more of the Cattle Call Podcast. All right, everybody, today's Cattle Call was brought to you courtesy of Zentech Consultants. That's Rocco and I. Zentech Consultants works with design and manufacturing firms to help our clients purchase and implement the software that they need in these complex industries. We provide a single point of contact for clients to buy, develop, and learn the most vital software systems for your specific needs. Zentech strives to be your trusted technology partner from your initial needs all the way through long-term support and training for your entire staff. So Rocco, why don't you tell them how to reach out to Zentech?
All right, yeah, you can reach out to us through zentechconsultants.net. You can email us at sales@zentechconsultants.net, or you can even call us, 866-824-4459.
Excellent. We look forward to hearing from y'all. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Cattle Call Podcast. And we're talking with Robert Green, once again, one of our absolutely favorite guests. And we're looking at the idea of your software portfolio and how to manage it. So in this half, I really want to focus on some of the technical underpinning to your software approach, right? Things that will have an impact once you've got a really good idea of what tools you actually need and don't need within your portfolio, and you're ready to go in and start making those changes. So Robert, I'm going to start. Let's start with licensing options, right? That's a big concern for people in this industry, and let's be honest, really any industry today. There's been a big pushback recently against the SaaS, right? The software as a service license model. We've seen a lot of arguments in the press over the big software giants and what they're doing there with subscriptions. And we've seen a lot of growth with optional subscription, perpetual model hybrids, and things of that nature, right? People giving choices about it. So what are the big concerns about licensing that you want to consider when you're looking to adjust your portfolio?
Well, number one, like you said, it's always cost, right? I mean, what I want to do is I want to get the software coverage that I need. That's non-negotiable because that's what I need for us to do our work. But I want to cover the users who need that software in the absolute minimal cost fashion. So I think the big change has been, if we go back 4 or 5 years ago, if I need 3 more licenses this year, I just bought 3 more, and I didn't think about, is this going to be subscription? Is it going to be perpetual? Is this something that's on a per user basis? I never worried about that. But with all these changes, CAD managers really have to understand how these licensing models work, and you have to run the different scenarios and figure out what your bottom line cost is going to be. Now, the metric that I go after is how can I support the greatest number of users with the fewest number of licenses? Because typically, if I find that answer, licenses that are shareable somehow, that's usually going to generate my lowest cost per user. For tools that don't give me the option, like they're just, it's just a cloud-based per user charge, that it's non-negotiable, that's it, then the only control you have over that scenario is to think really long and hard about how many people truly need that. And in those cases, I see people starting to kind of do some funny business, like they have generic email accounts and they have different people log in from different places. And that is something that you pursue at your own peril, because the software companies can generally figure out that you're doing that.
Yeah, it's a violation of your EULA.
You're going to be out of licensing compliancy. There you go. I finally spit it out. If you do that. So you really have to be aware of what this is going to cost. It used to be, as a CAD manager, I just purely worried about function. But now I worry about licensing technology and license cost almost more than I worry about the tool. And that's too bad, because that means we're becoming accountants, rather than CAD professionals.
Yeah. And to be fair about it, and I know we've talked about this before, Robert, I'm not a huge fan of that software as a service, that forced renewal every year, that annual subscription, whether you want it or not. But to be fair, on the one positive thing that I think can be said about it is that does, in its way, it's not that it's the most cost-effective way, but it does, I think, alleviate a little bit of the problem. I think a lot of the issue, when you're going back to what we were saying earlier, that when you've got a company that has 70 licenses of Civil 3D and 17 users, a lot of times it was because, like you said, 4 or 5 years ago, they had 70 people, and they're like, oh, just buy licenses. Well, now they've got licenses, and they're like, well, just keep them under subscription so we don't lose them in case we get busy again. And they're kind of like hedging against the busy day that they're hoping is looming beyond the horizon. And I think that the one benefit with those annual subscriptions is that you can just go, look, don't need it this year. I'll pay the subscription when I do need it, when business picks up. So I think that's it's positive, if you can really see it that way. All right, so Rocco, let's bring you back in here for a little bit on this conversation. So I know one of the things I know, Rocco, that you've been following, because we've talked about it, is the infamous Revit letter. Right? You've been following that story over the last month or so. So why don't you explain what that is, and how do you see that affecting licensing options for the CAD world as we move forward?
Yeah, well, I don't want to go down too much of a rabbit hole here, but I mean, there was an article that was put out in AEC magazine just last month, and a collection of collective, whatever the term is.
Everybody's having trouble spitting things out today.
A group of AEC firms, large AEC firms, got together and basically put out a letter to Autodesk, basically complaining about Revit and what's been happening over the past couple years. The lack of development, the fact that the cost of Revit has increased by 70%, and the return that they're getting, and so it was a big complaint. A few firms were mentioned, but a good number of them remained anonymous for fear of retribution from Autodesk, and that alone is scary in itself. That they're afraid that Autodesk is going to go after them for license compliance. But so it's a big thing. A lot of people are frustrated that there's not a lot of development that's being put into Revit in particular. And they're looking at the licensing model, saying, okay, you're forcing us into the named user model. It's costing us more and more and more, and what are we getting? And it just seems like I'm on the phone all day long with all different size firms, and I can tell you honestly that a lot of the small to medium sized firms are very, very angry over what's going on. But this letter took small to medium to large firms and really, really hammered Autodesk at what's been going on, particularly around Revit.
Yeah, and I don't mean to beat up on Autodesk or Revit, right? In particular here, I'm not trying to bash anybody, but it's the concept that's, like I said, it's that software as a service model that has really taken over the entire software industry over the last 5 to 6 years. It's prevalent everywhere because it's highly beneficial, and to the software developer, they generate massive profits, but people are not seeing the benefit that was promised to it, and there's been a big backlash, and I think that changes a lot, and that's something you really need to consider long term. Like Robert was saying, you have to get a little bit more involved in doing the number crunching. Does this benefit me over 1 year, 2 year, 5 years? Where does that leave us? Which is the right licensing structure? So,
and look at your options, right? I mean, there are other options out there besides just Autodesk.
You know, Bricsys, but we're not saying that. But Robert's here, so we can. So it's Bricsys.
You're welcome.
There you go. All right. So one of the discussions that I run into on a very regular basis, it's kind of a variant of this. It's the contest between standalone licenses versus cloud-based solutions, and not just in the license, but in the way that the software works. And I think there are still a large number of folks out there who think of anything cloud-based as being, not secure and it's subject to being stolen and hacked. Apparently there's an international syndicate of CAD thieves out there who are selling our widget plans on the dark CAD market. And I still haven't gotten my access password to that yet, Robert. If you can get that for me, I'd appreciate it. Yeah, cool. So, to be honest, I think that it's getting a lot better. I think, particularly with, everyone having to work remotely over the last year or so, because, probably the only good thing I think that's come out of the coronavirus crazy is that people are becoming much more comfortable with cloud and remote access features. And I've been a big proponent of cloud-based tools for many, many years. And I have a marked preference for those. But they're not always the perfect answer for everybody. Right, so Robert, what are your thoughts on standalone standalone systems versus cloud-based systems? Is there any one right answer, and how do our listeners decide what's the right option for them and when to make this shift?
So let me go back to the portfolio analogy. If you're saying, well, should we be in standalone or should we be in cloud? That's like saying, should you be in 100% in stocks or 100% in bonds? The answer is you probably shouldn't be 100% in anything. The right answer is that it's probably going to be some sort of a hybridized environment. Now, personally, I like standalone tools because they don't really have any bandwidth constraints. Right? I mean, they just run on my computer. I don't even have to be connected, which means that everything is behind my firewall, which means it's kind of inherently less likely to be hacked. And it's certainly more modular, right? I can get plugins that are going to integrate a lot more easily with the standalone piece of software than I could if I have to go into a highly regimented CAD environment. But now, cloud stuff clearly makes sense for collaborative functions. But trying to get something to integrate, say, with a BIM 360, is a lot more difficult because you don't control the software infrastructure of that tool. The manufacturer does. So what I've just illustrated, that the two different platforms are good at two different things and have different points of integration. So, but one thing that I do see that I think is one of the biggest myths that gets sold is that CAD tools have to be collaborative. And I don't think that's always true because a lot of times people design things in CAD tools, save the file, and then that file gets collaborated with. So I think cloud platforms are actually kind of separate from CAD tools in a lot of the places that I go. Kind of depends on whether your design team is fragmented all over the place or if they're more or less in one centralized location. So I'm always looking at both, and it's probably always going to be a hybrid of both. So to me, it is all about what do your users need to produce their data, let that need determine the tool, which is in stark contrast to a lot of what I see in the press, which is we're preaching the tools and now you're trying to drive your design behavior around the tools. No, figure out what you need to design and let the needs determine the tools.
That's an excellent point. I think you make a really good point there as well in terms of recognizing the difference between collaboration and file sharing. They're not the same thing. They're not even close to being the same thing. And yeah, I think marketing speak sells collaboration as the be all end all. But you're absolutely right. Unless you're working the design together interactively at the same time, you don't need collaboration tools. Give them the file, let them do their work, and send it back. Yeah, it's an excellent point. Okay. All right. So then, in terms of the software portfolio rebalance we're talking about, Robert, is that something that most people you think or most firms can handle on their own, or and look, even though Zentek's the host of this really cool podcast you like being on, and we're a consultant, I'm not putting any pressure on you. Do you think that people could benefit more from bringing in a consultant for this type of project?
I think that can absolutely be a great check. I mean, a lot of customers think they have a pretty good handle on this, and I always recommend that they do as much analysis as they can, so that when they bring in somebody external, somebody like you or me in my prior career, that way when we come in to help them, they are as informed as they can possibly be. But the outside opinion it's irreplaceable, because somebody who's out there doing this with 20 or 30 different companies every year, they're going to see best practices and tricks and gimmicks and things that the company could do that, again, they don't know what they don't know. So it's kind of, if you think about it, it's really cheap insurance, to go bring somebody in for the short term to kind of validate your plan. Look, you probably pay an accountant 2 or 3 days a year to do your taxes just so you don't mess up. Why wouldn't you bring in a forensic CAD, consultant to help you do the same thing? This is expensive stuff, and if you make a bad decision, it costs a lot of money. So why would you not avail yourself of an expert opinion?
It's an excellent answer, and you're absolutely right. The right answer there is not just like you just don't bring in an accountant and pay a full-time accountant to handle all your books and your billing for you, because it's too much money, right? Same thing, right? A consultant is great consulting. You've got most of it done. You've settled on what you need, and you're just like, hey, can you just look this over and make recommendations? Make sure we're on the right track, right? And so it's a little bit of a hybrid there. So I would absolutely agree with that. It's a good answer. So, all right. So, whether you do it with a consultant or without a consultant, whether you're doing it cloud or standalone, software as a service or perpetual license, whatever the right answer may be for you, right? I do think that every firm needs to do this on a regular basis. You have to, to my mind, I would say at least annually, right? Do a portfolio evaluation. See where you stand. What do we have? What new tools are there? What issues has our staff run into over the last year that we can address? Right? To my mind, this concept, it's not like a 401k, right? Where you invest it and you forget it and you move on and somebody else is going to handle it for you. It's more like an active investment account, to my mind, right? It needs constant nurturing and redistribution, and sometimes, like Robert said, even sell-offs, right? That's kind of my takeaway from that. So Robert, last thoughts on this topic. What would you like the listeners to take away from today's conversation?
Can I tag on to what you said just a moment ago? It's not like a 401k where you invest it and forget it. It is active management, because this is software technology and licensing is fundamentally changing. It's almost like the currency is changing. So you're absolutely, you need to be keeping track of this at least annually, if not maybe twice annually, just to stay on top of it. And this is definitely something CAD managers should be involved with talking to financial people and the power users around them to continue to understand the needs and reharmonizing what software is required to do the jobs. What would I take away from this conversation? It is that CAD managers need to become far more budgetary. They need to be thinking in a far more advanced time frame. They need to be thinking years out instead of, oh my God, I've got to get this PDF files captured next Wednesday. This is becoming a more long-term thought process job. It's more IT related. It's more financial related. And your company, if you're a CAD manager, your company is looking at you to get the best return on investment out of all these CAD tools possible. And just like in a financial world, the way you get the best return on investment is you purchase the assets that are going to allow you to perform. You keep your costs down as much as possible so that you get the best possible return for every dollar you put into it. And that's what you need to do with your software portfolio. So if you're not thinking financially, if you're not thinking strategically, you need to start putting more emphasis there. That would be my takeaway.
There you go, right? You're a CAD manager. You've got to be management and not just a CAD guy anymore. Absolutely a great point.
The word manager is a lot bigger than CAD.
Absolutely is. So, all right. So I think we can actually leave it at that for today. So I want to thank Mr. Robert Green of International CAD Management and BricsCAD fame for being here with us again. All right. So, Robert, thanks for agreeing to come back and listen to our rambling and helping us out.
You're most welcome. You guys are fun.
Thank you, Robert.
And we've all agreed that Jim is the good-looking one. I'm pretty sure Robert said yes, that was the case. That's what I heard.
I did not hear that. But let's let the listeners decide.
Oh, there you go. Feel free. We'll put our pictures up on the web and let them be frightened. All right, Robert. We hope you will come back again and talk to us in the future. And we're going to thank you one more time. All right, and other than that, folks, we're going to sign out here, and we will catch you on the next episode of the Cattle Call Podcast.